We're always having adventures with audio-visual. Last week in Sudbury, completely failed. Hello, everybody. Thank you to everyone who organized tonight. Thank you, John, for the warm introduction. Thank you to all of you for coming out to talk about the topic on which I most want to talk to you about, which is climate. So, some of you probably noticed already that we do have our materials from our office on the back table. If you didn't find them, there's a table over there with copies of our reports, and we have summaries of the climate report and a number of the others. We also have full copies of some of the climate reports. If they're all gone by the time you got there, because we can only carry 2 boxes today, you can download them from our website, or we would gladly send you as many hard copies as you like. So please help yourself. So, briefly who I am and what I do, although John's already covered that. A little bit of the science on why climate change is everything, and I will go quite quickly through those slides in the hope of giving time for questions. Some things about opportunities for action. Anyone who wants copies of the slides, they're going to be available from Divest Waterloo. That's divestwaterloo.ca, and you could also email our office. My email address is commissioner@eco.on.ca, and if you forget that, just look up Environment Commissioner. So, John's already explained, this is my job, to report to the legislature on energy, environment, and climate, and to be the guardian of the Environmental Bill of Rights. Basically, the people of Ontario have learned we cannot safely, blindly trust the government to look after the environment. Right? We provide some useful tools on our website. All of this work of helping people understand and use their environmental rights, this is going to be folded back into the government, so this is the fox and the chicken house. But in any event, at the moment, our website, we have all this information. Would you, assuming that the government follows the Environmental Bill of Rights, which sometimes they do, would you like to know when they propose an environmentally significant decision? Would you like that? Okay, do they tell you? Okay, so on our website, we hired a kid to write a hack. So if you go to our website, you see that red arrow, it says get registry notices that interest you. If you go there, you click it, you put in your email address and any keyword you want, which can be a postal code, you will get a free email to your email box as soon as anything goes on the environmental registry with that word. Can you use that? Is there someone you can tell about it? All right, please do. So, as I mentioned, I'm required by law, oops, this is a little imperfect. I'm required by law under the Environmental Bill of Rights to submit 3 reports, a minimum of 3 reports a year, 1 on energy, 1 on climate, and 1 on environmental protection. As John mentioned, government's not always pleased with what I have to say. I'm here today mostly talking about the climate report. And yes, climate change is everything. And I was an environmental and energy lawyer for 40 years before I became commissioner, and I had been absolutely blown away at how much worse climate change is than I knew, or that really shows from the newspapers. So basically the bottom line there is as bad as we thought, no, it's worse. And you hear a lot about, well, what's going to happen by 2100? 2100 is almost impossibly far from now. But today's toddlers are likely to still be alive then. And the work of fighting for climate, especially in the current political environment, can be really, really hard. We walk this razor blade of hope and despair. And so, in order to keep going, I think you have to care about some young person. Does everybody here have some young person you care about? I'm very fond of these 2, although they're really noisy. And so for them, we have to keep going. Even we can't count on being dead on time, but for them, for sure, big changes are coming. Because climate change is not just about polar bears anymore. It's not just about island states or mountain glaciers or, people far away. It's here. It's here right now. It's already having impacts. There's going to be much more in the future. But we're determining that future right now with what we're doing. And we know we have to do both of these things. We have to reduce our climate pollution, which is mostly about reducing the fossil fuels that we use. And we know we must also get ready for what's coming, because it's already coming. It's too late to pretend that it won't. We've already seen the highest temperatures in human civilization. Those red areas are record temperatures. 2016 so far, the hottest year for which we have records in the last 10,000 years. And we blew away temperature records all around the world, and we blew away records for how many records we blew away and by how much we blew them away. Do you see any places on that map that are blue that is cooler than average? There's a couple, you know what they are? That's the ice caps melting. We're also changing the temperature difference between the poles and the mid-latitudes. That changes how the winds blow. Changes how the currents move. We're directly attacking the natural systems on which our life depends. And every ton of fossil fuels that we use, every ton of carbon dioxide we put in the air is making it worse. And we don't have any more time to waste. Because normal's gone. So my experience has been that when people get bad news, whether it's health news or employment news or money news or whatever it is, you hear bad news, the natural tendency of many people is to hang on for normal to come back. And when we talk about normal for climate, generally we mean roughly the average of the 20th century. Our laws are written for that, our engineering standards are written for that, our culverts are designed for that, our half-load seasons designed for that, our crops were designed for that. So where's the average of the 20th century? It's that zero line. We don't live there anymore. And we know it can't come back. Because it takes about a generation between the time we put carbon dioxide into the air and the time that we really start experiencing the effects. So what you see on that slide does not yet include the impacts of most of the greenhouse gases, the climate pollution that we have all created in the last generation, during which time the rate of climate pollution has got worse every year. So we've locked in a lot more change that's coming our way. Now, one of the things that climate change does is heat up the world. It's not the only thing, but most of the heat is in the water. I mean, that's amazing. For those of you with really sharp eyes, you can see there's a little tiny red line on the bottom of that chart. That's how much of that extra heat's in the air. That's all that's in the air. There's about 3% in soil vegetation. There's about 3% in the ice. The rest of it is in the lakes and the oceans. Three big things that happens when you heat up water. First thing that happens, you lose oxygen. That matters for anything that has to breathe in the oceans. Second thing, warmer water takes up more space. Okay? So what happens to sea level when we warm the oceans? Does it matter if you believe in it? And what else happens when we warm the ocean? There's a clue on the slide. Right, because storms are heat engines. They get their energy from the heat at the surface of the ocean. The more we heat the ocean, the more what we get. The more. So, and that's sort of world average, and there's lots, I've got lots more slides, I don't have time to talk about that. So let's talk about Ontario. Did you know that Ontario is warming much faster than the world average? And did you know the warming is different in different parts of Ontario? So if you look here, you can see those sort of brown patches in the middle. I know when I turn my head, it's not as audible. Those brown patches in the middle, those are places where the growing season is expanding a lot. There are parts of Ontario where we now have 13 more frost-free days per decade for the last 4 decades. That's lightning speed if you're a tree or a bird or a bear. We've also got a few places in Ontario, shown on the blue on that map, where there's been no increase in growing seasons. But in the places that are getting warmer and drier and warmer for longer, we're getting more what? More fire. We're seeing a lot of things change. And now, I should have said that right. So Ontario's already 1.5 degrees warmer just in the last half century or so, which is quite a bit faster than the world average. The world average is about 1 degree in about the last century and a half. If you look at Toronto, in that same period of time, Toronto has warmed more than 3 times faster than the world average. I know people don't like to see things in Toronto, but I don't have graphs like this for a kitchen, so you can use this one. Now, all those things are about averages, but averages don't tell you the whole story. If your head is in the oven and you have 3rd-degree burns and your feet are in the freezer and you have frostbite, on average you are? Averages don't tell you very much about what you really need to know. And one of the big things that climate change does is it increases extreme events. It's increasing them all around the world, but this is what's happening here. Canada and the US were some of the luckiest people in the world just since I was young. Climate extremes now 4 times more often, and remember, this is only what's happened already, not what we've already locked in. Remember that young person you said you care about? Do you want them in a car driven by someone who's been drinking? Hopefully you're going to say no. Okay, why? Because they're 3 or 4 times more likely to crash, even if they're just somewhere around the legal limit. Well, what have we done to the climate risks to our kids? Can they get out of the car? We're changing the natural systems on which our life depends, and we're starting to see some of the impacts. These pictures are all from Ontario in the last couple of years. It's not just the temperature we're changing, we're also changing the precipitation. These are maps of how much precipitation has changed in Ontario in the last couple of decades. And you can see, the colors aren't perfect, but there are parts of Ontario now that are quite a bit drier in the summer than they were before. Parts are wetter. But look what happens in the winter. We're seeing big changes in the winter. And some of that used to always be snow is now coming as rain. So, Northern Ontario, a lot of areas, they used to have consistent cold below zero weather basically from October to April, and the infrastructure is designed for that, the animals are adapted to that, but that's not what we're seeing now. We had heavy rain just before Christmas. We had heavy rain just on December 28th. What is that? And then deep freeze. What happens? What do you get when you get that? You get ice. You get ice. You get potholes, you get concrete spalling, you get moose dying, you get the browse covered. We're getting more erosion. People usually like to talk about money, so let's talk about money. This is just insured losses, just in Ontario, just from extreme weather. For those mathematically minded, there's no inflation in this figure, this is constant dollars, there's no wealth effect in this figure, it's been adjusted for GDP growth. And on the left-hand side, those light blue numbers, that was when we used to get data for every climate disaster in Ontario. Now we only get insured losses for the ones each individually over 25 million. So if we had all the numbers, it would be growing faster. And this is just the insured losses. The uninsured losses are probably 1 to 3 times as large again. And just in case you're wondering, yes, this is costing every Ontarian much more than cap and trade was. What do you think, okay, anybody here think that insurance companies are charities? Anybody think this kind of loss experience might affect the cost of insurance? Anybody think it might affect the availability of insurance? Do you think that could have an important effect on people? So where are we now? This is from the Insurance Bureau of Canada. And it's not just money, right? Also health, long list of health impacts. The Canadian Medical Association has just endorsed the Lancet Climate Countdown, that climate change is now the biggest public health threat of this century. Fossil fuel consumption and burning is now the biggest threat to children's health in the world. Forests, I've already mentioned. The forest fires, we had forest fires all around the world this year, last year. Remember where there were fires? It wasn't just in Ontario. Where else were there fires last year? British Columbia, California, Portugal, Sweden, Australia. Right? The world is on fire. And it happens there, but we also breathe the smoke. What about the smoke from the California wildfires, folks? We all breathe this. It's not just people, plants, animals, and fish. The picture on the left is fish in Ontario dying from disease. When the water gets warmer, the oxygen levels go down, the fish are stressed, they succumb to the diseases. Moose are in sharp decline, but lots of other evidence of that. Also significant impacts on food and farming. It can be good to have a longer growing season, that's great. We can also get heat stress, we have more unpredictability, the precipitation is less certain, we're getting more erosion, we're losing more soil, putting more nutrients into the water, that creates more algae blooms, we're seeing also more pests. We can be in really big disturbances that are going to be very hard to withstand. And how much worse is it going to get? Well, that depends mostly on people, how much we emit, what we do about it. And Ontario, because we're warming faster than the world average, we're going to see bigger impacts here than the world average, and sooner. And it also depends on the natural tipping points in the world. Not all of it's about us anymore. So if you think about it, when sun falls on ice, most of it is reflected, right? And if sun falls on water, what happens? Most of it is absorbed as what? As heat. What does that do to the ice around it? So the more ice we melt, the more heat the water absorbs. The more heat the water absorbs, the more ice we melt. And we're starting, how would we know if we hit the tipping point? Well, if you look at the graph, you can see that this is a graph of all the world's sea ice coverage since we were able to take measurements. And decade after decade, the amount has gone down, but the pattern didn't break until September 2016. And since then, we're seeing catastrophic losses in sea ice. So we're starting to flirt with these tipping points, and they're not independent tipping points, one can trigger another. So, as one report I read this week said, you know, we're in for surprises. We're in for big surprises, because our assumptions are based on natural systems that we're destroying. So is it too late? Well, I have to say, too late for what? Is it too late for that young person you care about to have the same kind of world that we had growing up? Yeah, it's too late. We blew that away. Is it too late to avoid having to face real challenges, even here in Ontario? Yeah, it's too late for that. We blew that away. Is it too late to make a big difference in what's ahead? Is it too late to make a big difference in the lives of those kids you care about? We're in that moment right now. We don't have much time left. We've got a small handful of years. But we're in that moment right now. This is on our watch. This is our responsibility. Right now. So what can we do about it? Well, we wrote a whole report about that because we write reports. We got a long report with lots and lots of stats and data and things in it. But the short answer is we know what works to reduce our climate pollution. There's only 3 things that really work. Polluter pay, having a price on carbon emissions, investing the money in solutions, and regulations. Those are the only things that really work. And Ontario was doing so much right. We had a price on carbon. We had the coal plant closures, hugely important. Yes, it puts the cost of electricity up. It also dramatically improved the quality of the air. How many smog days did we have in Ontario in 2005? Anybody know? Last time we had all the coal plants running? Anybody want to pick a number? Oh, you guys are all alive in 2005. Doesn't anybody remember 2005? 53. Anybody in your family got lung issues, asthma, any kind of sensitivity? Those were brutally hard days for my husband. We closed the last coal plant in 2014. How many smog days in the spring of 2014? How many smog days did we have in 2014? How many smog days did we have in 2015? How many smog days did we have last year? Okay, so you paid a little more on your electricity rates. Was that a good trade-off? We were spending the money, investing in solutions, and we were making, admittedly, a very slow start on adaptation. And all these things were working. Ontario did something that, when I was a young lawyer, was known, completely obvious truth, impossible. That we couldn't grow GDP, increase population, and reduce fossil fuel use. We knew that was impossible, but look, Ontario did it. Did we still have good lives? And we know that there are lots of benefits for reducing fossil fuel use in Ontario. One of the things is that Ontario drains, we don't produce fossil fuels here, almost not at all. And so we import almost all the fossil fuels that we use. Anybody want to guess how much we spend every year in Ontario, money out of your pocket, that drains out of the province every single year importing fossil fuels? Anybody want to pick a number? It's like bingo. Pick a number. Well, it varies with the price of oil and so on, but it's been between about $15 billion and $24 billion every year, and then we do it again the year after that, and then we do it again the year after that. If we were 10% more efficient, and we kept an extra, I don't know, $1.5 to $2 billion in Ontario, do you think of anything good we could do with that? There's lots of evidence that if we could reduce what we spend on fossil fuels, spend it on energy efficiency, keep it in the economy, we could have more jobs for young people. We could have better lives for everybody. But instead, if we want to keep deepening our dependence on fossil fuels, we're going to keep pouring money out of the economy every year. We know there's big public health benefits. It's traffic-related air pollution is one of the largest human health threats, and it's especially for children, and it's especially for babies. Babies get 60% more traffic-related air pollution than adults, just because if they're sitting in a stroller, their nose is at tailpipe level. So we're poisoning our own kids. Strong evidence out of China these days that traffic-related air pollution, fossil fuel combustion, significantly affects the intelligence of children for their lifetime. We can have a clean economy, we could have clean competitiveness, we could be competing on a world economy where there's trillions of dollars looking for places to invest in clean economy, and Ontario was right at the top of that list until June. General Motors doesn't want to make electric cars in Ontario. Do you wonder why? Car makers want to make electric cars in jurisdictions that support electric cars. Ontario was one of those places until when? Okay, are we now? We know that electricity is the key to our future. One of the things that people often think is that energy and electricity are the same. They're not. Electricity is only about 20% of our energy in Ontario. It's the smallest and cleanest of our major energy sources, but we do now have remarkably clean electricity because we closed the coal plants and we do very little from oil. In 2017, 96% of our electricity was fossil fuel free in Ontario. This is astonishing. And it's also the key to the future. It also means that our businesses have a real competitive advantage. If they're competing in a world market where some value is given to low carbon footprints, which more and more there is, clean electricity is the advantage. So we, as you can see, our largest use of fossil fuels, our biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Ontario is petroleum products. It's gasoline and diesel that we burn, drive and run. And the next biggest is natural gas. And the thing is, we have technological solutions for a lot of it. So we came tonight in an electric car. We like it better than a regular car, right, Michelle? It was more fun than a regular car. It's quieter, smoother, easier to drive. It works perfectly well. It got us here, although we got lost in downtown Kitchener. But you know, I mean, we still need it here eventually. So we know they're putting a price on carbon. So Ontario turned its back on pricing carbon immediately before the Nobel Prize for Economics was awarded. Why? To the guy who proved that putting a price on carbon is the cheapest and best way of moving an economy towards a low economy, a sustainable low carbon future. So we're going with no scientific evidence, no factual basis, no consultation, in exactly the wrong direction. Cap and trade was working. Wasn't going to do everything right away. We have an $800 billion a year economy in Ontario. Cap and trade was bringing in $1.9 billion a year. Now, I mean, to me, $1.9 billion is a lot of money, but it's not a lot compared to an $800 billion a year economy, and it was going to take some time to really turn things around. But already in 18 months, I saw changes happening all over Ontario, because when pollution is free, the chief financial officer doesn't have to know how much there is. Once there is a price on it, even if it's not very much, then there's an economic benefit to figuring it out getting all those smart young people with their ideas, and people were coming up with ideas all over Ontario to make things better. And some of them, you just think, scratch your head, it's simple. So the General Motors, talking about General Motors, in their engine plant in St. Catharines, they use an awful lot of natural gas. Well, once we had cap and trade, they looked next door where there's a landfill. Guess what landfills produce? Methane, which is another word for natural gas. And so they made a deal with the guy next door who's got all this methane they're trying to burn to build a pipeline between the two of them so that General Motors can take that methane from the landfill and use it to run their engine plant. And that drives their operating costs down, which makes them more competitive, makes it easier to win contracts against the factories in the United States, and we get less pollution from the landfill. And we have examples like this all over Ontario. We know that making polluters pay creates innovation and creativity. And look what happened in Sudbury. Remember Sudbury used to look like the we all know this, right? Countdown acid rain. There were so many complaints from the companies, oh, we can't do this, it's going to be terrible. And you know what? They did, and they've been prosperous ever since. And they found better technologies, and they found actually that instead of dumping all that sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, they could capture it and sell it as sulfur. So these things work, and they work over and over again. And it also has done wonderful things with the money. So the hospitals in Ontario, a lot of them are old, right? They were built in the 60s and the 70s, and you got patches put on and wings put on, and they spend an extraordinary amount of money just trying to heat and cool these places. So they were on track to save $60 million every single year, which they were going to put back into patient care if they got some money, which they were going to get from cap and trade, to upgrade their systems, make their buildings less leaky, improve their furnaces. So one of the ones that got in early was the Elliott Lake General Hospital. Anybody been to Elliott Lake? Okay, right? So it's an old hospital, and it's cold there in the winter. They're now saving $300,000 every single year, which they're putting back into patient care because they were allowed to make their building more efficient. Sudbury, 2 of the social housing buildings, they never have money. Right? They're always government money. They never have money to improve the buildings. They got $100,000 from cap and trade money. They were able to cut the cost of operating the buildings in half. And now, for the first time, everyone in every unit has a decent temperature all year round. And we saw hundreds of these examples all over Ontario. Were these a good idea? But they've all been torn up now. They've all been canceled. We're going backwards. We also tore up contracts. So you hear a lot about Ontario being open for business. Well, one of the things that business has always told me that is absolutely essential to them is sanctity of contract, being able to rely on contracts, being able to rely on the law. So we've now had, I think, 18 times now, the government pass laws to break the law and to give themselves immunity for variously misrepresentation, breach of the Securities Act, breach of contract, breach of trust, breach of fiduciary duty. In Ontario, we went around the world inviting people to come to Ontario and build a green economy here. So for example, the large renewable procurement. We invited bids from all around the world for the most competitive renewable energy contracts to be built here. There are 106 expressions of interest. There was a 2-year intense competition process. 16 of those projects were awarded contracts to build in Ontario. They spent millions of dollars seeking approvals. 10 of those 16 have now been canceled. 8 of those 10 had significant Indigenous ownership. So one of the things we've seen is that these cancellations severely hurt Indigenous communities around Ontario who had invested heavily their time, their energy, their capacity, their hopes for their economic development, jobs for the young people, and we've thrown all of that away. But we're going to need the electricity because we already know that in 2023, the Independent Electrical System Operator is forecasting that at peak we don't have enough electrical capacity. And we just canceled 752 clean energy contracts and passed a special law to make a wind farm that had already been built based on all legal approvals to be torn down again. So we're going to have an international lawsuit because we don't honor our contracts and don't honor our laws. What do you think that does to our reputation around the world? We're also actively subsidizing fossil fuel use. to the tune of something over $600 million a year of Yarmite tax money, and we're also going to be now spending $3 billion a year of tax money subsidizing electricity rates, starting January 1st. So if the province won't lead, and the province, as you know, is going as fast as possible in the wrong direction on everything that I report on, just about, are there other things? Who else can lead? Should we all just sit on our hands and go home and cry? Should we do nothing? Is that a good answer? Okay, so there are other people who can and do act, and the federal backstop, the federal carbon tax, it's not as good for Ontario as cap and trade, but we don't have cap and trade anymore, so now we have the federal carbon tax. It's a bloody good start. So what can we all do? Well, there's three things that I say to every audience. First of all, we can't leave climate just up to the government, and we certainly can't leave it just up to the provincial government. So, three things we can all do. First thing, reduce our own climate pollution. We in Canada, almost all of us, we live very luxurious lives. We all have rooms to reduce. And people do it different ways. Some people eat less meat. Some people carpool. Some people drive a more efficient vehicle. Some people make their homes much more efficient. There's lots of different ways to do it. But everybody can do something. So, figure out what it is, reduce it 5% a year. I must admit, my per capita carbon footprint went down a lot when my mother and my son moved into my house. It has other consequences, but there you go. Right, but it cuts the per capita energy use in the house by, yeah, never mind. So next thing is to get ready to adapt, because big changes are coming, right? We know we're in for a wilder, wetter, less predictable weather, and that means more interruptions in services, more unexpected things. So, emergency services have been telling us for years you should be ready to withstand 3 days. Right? You should have food and water and warmth for 3 days by yourself without the government bailing you out. How many people have that? Okay, everybody doesn't have your hand up. Look at your neighbor. My kids say they're coming to my house. This is not a very good answer, right? Everybody needs to be somewhat self-sufficient, because bad things are going to happen. We don't know when, we don't know exactly what, but we can see they're already happening, so you need to get ready. But the third thing, and the most important thing, and honestly it seems to be the hardest thing for Canadians, is to speak up. We know that this is what affects people's opinions and beliefs. Simple, clear messages, repeated often by a variety of trusted voices. Now that doesn't mean just, lawyers from Toronto. Right? Veracity does a survey every year. They've done it every year since 1983. Who does the public most trust to tell the truth? Anybody know who's number one? Nurses. Nurses are number one. Doctors shortly behind. But there's a lot of other folks that people trust, and certainly religious institutions. Faith leaders have an opportunity to be that trusted voice. Business leaders can be trusted voices. The point is, we now need to hear from everybody, to the people from whom you are a trusted voice. You must be a trusted voice for somebody. Are you talking to them about this? Are you talking to them about this all the time? It is the most, okay, good. Don't stop. It is the most important thing, because it's going to change everything. So, this is a long one, so I'll read it. I used to think that the top environmental problems are biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. This is written by a scientist. I thought that 30 years of good science could address those problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And that's where all of you come in. The scientists are doing their job. The scientists have been doing their job for 30 years. We have the largest scientific collaboration in human history in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We now know all the bases of climate change. Yes, there's lots of details that aren't clear, and there's going to be lots for scientists to do for a long time yet, but we know the basics. We know what we're doing wrong. We know basically what we have to do, but we're not doing it. So that has to be handed back over then from the scientists and the people like me to people like you. How do you take that back into your community, into your faith community, into your bowling club, into your library group, into your workplace, into your family, and put a hole in that apathy, get people energized, get people working on this. How many people here would like to have some hope? Okay, so it seems to me there's only one recipe for hope. You have to start by looking at the facts. We have to look at the facts in the face. We've got to know what's going on. But if we just stop there, we feel helpless and hopeless. So what we have to do next is look at each other. How can we work with other people on these issues? That's the only place the hope lies. But look at how many great people are here today. Look at how many great organizations are here today. And we know we can do things. And faith leadership really matters. Because religious communities get together with a shared moral understanding. You're there because you care about right and wrong. Otherwise, what the heck are you doing at church or synagogue or whatever? So that's one of the great things for me about my synagogue is I can go to anybody in the synagogue and badger them for some good cause. Because they've come for a shared conversation about how we should live, what we owe each other, what's right and wrong. So I can talk about right and wrong, and I can coax people into doing things like inviting strangers to the house for Rosh Hashanah or whatever, because we have a shared moral basis. Well, every religion got up at the Parliament of World Religions in November and talked about their shared moral basis of care for creation and their duties to our children and grandchildren, or 7 generations, as the case may be. We all share that. So what are you doing about it? And I told Lucy, it was wonderful hearing all the great things that the various religions talked about in this Parliament. But I said, I've been commissioner for 3 years, not one of you has ever crossed my desk. Not one of you has spoken at the Select Committee about the damage that's being done in Ontario. Where are you when it counts? Invisible. Is that still okay? Is it okay today as you see what's happening today? Are you personally going to do something to change it? Because if you aren't, who do you think will? This is up to all of us. Thank you.